On page 20, I almost overlooked this, I think. Tillich has a treatment on creation out of nothing. The Latin phrase, of course, is creatio ex nihilo, which really adds nothing to the English, creation out of nothing. One of my pet peeves is people that think they know the Latin phrase. They like to throw it around. But it's good to know that it exists, I guess. Creatio ex nihilo. That big paragraph on page 20, Tillich mentions that Clement of Alexandria, the second line in that big paragraph. Clement explains, "O great demiurge," probably an unusual word for us generally, speaking of him, of God, as the great builder of the universe and the Lord of everything. Demiurge was a term that Plato, I'm not saying Plato coined it, I don't know, but Plato used it. You can almost think of, in fact, Plato the philosopher, demiurge was a notion or a concept of a kind of creator being, divine, sort of. But demiurge kind of had this implication of someone who shapes or fashions, we'll say, the world, and generally out of materials that are available to use. So I'm thinking of Plato, not Plato the philosopher, but Plato the stuff. So a demiurge would be kind of the notion of a being who takes, we'll say stuff like Plato, and then make stuff out of it, including the philosopher Plato, eventually. So demiurge is certainly not a particularly Christian term, but it is true that some of the early Christian philosophers utilized it. Clement exclaims, "O great demiurge," these concepts which seem so natural to us. Now, the concept he means here is God as creator, and not simply God as fashioner of stuff out of pre-existing matter. Okay. A side note: the well-known religious tradition in the world today that makes quite a big deal out of the idea that God, actually gods, but we'll talk about the God of our world, and I don't know how far LDS think that God's authority extends, but God fashions or organizes worlds out of matter that already exists, that exists eternally. That's the LDS position. Many gods, actually, and many worlds, and eternally existing spirits and eternally existing matter. So you have, actually for LDS, in all of reality, probably something like numberless deities, a lot of deities, and in principle, unlimited material to work with. So our world, and I suppose at least our solar system, and perhaps more, for LDS thinkers, has been shaped into being out of matter that existed already. Proto-matter, maybe we just want to talk about subatomic particles, I don't know, but just stuff that existed. All right, so that's the LDS position in a nutshell. And as somebody smart once said, anything you can put in a nutshell probably belongs there. I'm speaking not so much about the LDS doctrine, although I profoundly disagree with it, as I am speaking about my summary of it. That's what belongs in the nutshell. All right. I probably belong in a nutshell, but that's a different thing. Creation out of nothing, back to Tillich, means that God did not find an already pre-existent matter when he started to create. There was no matter already existing that would resist form or being formed, as was the case in Neoplatonic paganism, and thus a matter that must be transcended by a power that could shape it, right? Shape it into something good. Rather, the material world is an object of God's creation. Semicolon. Semicolon, because that what's before the semicolon is a sentence. What comes after the semicolon will also be a sentence. But Tillich is saying, read this all together basically as one big thought, right? The material world is good and must not be disparaged or rejected or downplayed for the sake of salvation. As he goes on to say, here it is,